How they filmed The Matrix. First, take the right pill, and then you'll find out. To bring this technically complex film to life, the directors had to prove their talent, and to execute their unique ideas, they resorted to a bit of trickery. Despite all the challenges, the movie exceeded even the boldest expectations, thrilled audiences, and earned high praise from critics. Movies Inside Out presents. The Matrix is a cult sci-fi action film by the Wachowski brothers about a simulated reality that launched a successful franchise and inspired filmmakers around the globe. How did a sushi recipe influence the movie's style? Why was the crew almost arrested? And what book did all the actors have to read? The answers to these and other questions are coming right up. The creation story. The story of The Matrix began in 1994, when brothers Larry and Andy Wachowski decided to develop a script for a feature film. At the time, the future directors were working with Marvel, writing dialogue for comics, including Hellraiser by Clive Barker. They were inspired to venture into filmmaking by the book How I Made 100 Movies in Hollywood and Never Lost a Dime, written by B-movie director Roger Corman. Initially, The Matrix was envisioned as a comic book, and the Wachowskis' first screenplay was a horror story about cannibals titled Carnivore. Unsurprisingly, Hollywood showed no interest in such a topic, and the Wachowskis were advised to work on a more conventional story. Their second project, Assassins, caught the attention of producer Dino De Laurentiis, who quickly purchased the rights to the screenplay. However, he decided not to develop it himself and sold the script to Warner Bros. Executive producer Lorenzo Di Bonaventura, liked the work of the aspiring writers, but handed it over to Brian Helgeland for revisions before production. The result, directed by Richard Donner, was a decent but unremarkable action film starring Sylvester Stallone, Antonio Banderas, and Julianne Moore. It ended up significantly different from the Wachowskis' original vision. In late 1994, the brothers turned their full attention to The Matrix, now intended as a film. However, after the release of Assassins, they realized they would need to direct this new project themselves to retain creative control. Once they completed the screenplay, inspired by dark Japanese comics, martial arts films, noir detective stories, and supernatural themes, they pitched it to producer Joel Silver. While the futuristic concept impressed Silver, he hesitated to entrust such a challenging project to first-time directors. Silver advised the brothers to start their directing careers with a simpler story, leading them to quickly draft a screenplay for the neo-noir bound. The film was released under Dino De Laurentiis' production company and became their debut feature. It received critical acclaim and proved to producers that the Wachowskis were capable of handling larger projects. Armed with the Matrix script, the Wachowskis approached Warner Bros., but the studio was slow to greenlight production. Executives struggled to understand the concept and visualize the film. To convince the studio, the Wachowskis enlisted artists Jeff Darrow and Steve Skroce to create a 600-page storyboard for the massive script, already envisioned as part of a trilogy. The visual materials persuaded Warner Bros. To move forward with the project, but the studio initially approved a budget of only $10 million, far less than the $80 million the Wachowskis had requested. Faced with a choice between creating a standard low-budget action film by cutting most of their ideas or taking a risk, the brothers chose the latter. They used the allocated funds to shoot the iconic opening chase scene featuring Trinity. The finished footage impressed the producers, who agreed to raise the budget from $10 million to $63 million, betting on the Wachowskis' originality and innovative approach. As history shows, it was a gamble that paid off. Casting. When writing the script for The Matrix, the Wachowski brothers didn't envision any specific actor as Neo, leaving the role open to stars of vastly different types. The studio considered Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt, Ewan McGregor, and Leonardo DiCaprio. Interestingly, DiCaprio turned down the role due to the heavy use of special effects. Next in line was Nicolas Cage, who showed interest in the project, but ultimately decided against committing to a lengthy shoot in Australia. Another contender was Will Smith, who had recently starred in the highly successful Men in Black. By the way, you can check out our video about the making of this sci-fi action comedy on our channel. However, Smith didn't grasp the Matrix's concept and declined the offer, opting instead to star in the sci-fi western Wild Wild West, which was critically panned and a box office failure. The studio then approached Johnny Depp, but he was also reluctant to join such a strange project from rookie directors. The Wachowskis, however, were not discouraged, as by that time, they had come to see Keanu Reeves as the perfect Neo. Reeves had starred in the cyberpunk thriller Johnny Mnemonic in 1995, which had thematic similarities to The Matrix. Additionally, his interest in comics and martial arts made him the ideal candidate for the role.
Should we take him with us?
Definitely.
At one point, the creators considered rewriting Neo's character as female. Sandra Bullock was offered the role in this alternate version, but declined. She was also approached for the role of Trinity, but chose to appear in the forgettable romantic comedy Forces of Nature instead. Other actresses who auditioned for Trinity included Janet Jackson, Salma Hayek, and Jada Pinkett Smith. The role eventually went to Carrie-Anne Moss, a relatively unknown actress at the time who had mostly appeared in low-budget films. Interestingly, in 1993, Moss starred in a Canadian TV series called Matrix, which was unrelated to the Wachowskis' film. According to Moss, her audition involved a grueling 3-hour stamina test.
Since I am the ranking officer on this ship, if you don't like it, I believe you can go to hell.
Sean Connery was the Wachowskis' first choice for Morpheus, but like Will Smith, he didn't understand the film's concept and declined. The role was also offered to Arnold Schwarzenegger and Michael Douglas, who both passed. The studio then considered Gary Oldman, Samuel L. Jackson, and Val Kilmer, before finally casting Lawrence Fishburne in the role.
They are guarding all the doors, they are holding all the keys, which means that sooner or later, someone is going to have to fight them.
Agent Smith could have been played by Jean Reno, but he chose Roland Emmerich's Godzilla instead. The Wachowskis ultimately offered the part to Hugo Weaving, who had impressed them with his performance in the 1991 film Proof, and he accepted immediately.
I'm going to be as forthcoming as I can be, Mr. Anderson. You're here because we need your help.
For the role of Cypher, the Wachowskis went directly to Joe Pantoliano, with whom they had worked on their debut film, Bound.
If you would have told us the truth, we would have told you to shove that red pill right up your ass.
Interestingly, Andy and Larry Wachowski made cameo appearances as window washers alongside Neo.
We got a lot to do. We gotta get to it.
The filming process. Even with the increased budget, there still wasn't enough money to fully realize all the creative ideas. Producer Joel Silver came up with a solution: shoot the film in Australia, which cut production costs nearly in half. In fact, The Matrix started the trend of moving big productions overseas to save money and establish New South Wales as a major hub for filmmaking. Principal photography began in March 1998 and lasted 118 days, wrapping up in August. Most of the scenes were shot at the newly opened Fox Studios in Sydney. Some sequences utilized the city streets, though famous landmarks were avoided, as well as the Culver Studios in California. The Wachowskis were fans of Hong Kong action cinema, which heavily influenced the style of the film's action sequences. After watching the 1994 Jet Li film Fist of Legend, the brothers decided to hire director and martial arts choreographer Yuen Wu-Ping. Previously, Wu-Ping had declined offers to work on American films, but he was genuinely impressed by the Matrix script. In October 1997, Wu Ping organized a martial arts training camp for the cast. He and the Wachowskis wanted the actors to perform as many of their own stunts as possible without relying on doubles. For 6 months, the cast underwent intensive training. Since most of them had little to no prior experience with complex action scenes, the process was grueling. Hugo Weaving sustained a severe hip injury requiring surgery. During production, he also herniated a spinal disc and suffered from nausea while performing somersaults. In the fight scene between Smith and Morpheus, Weaving nearly broke Lawrence Fishburne's arm. Keanu Reeves, having practiced martial arts in the past, found the training slightly easier.
I know Kung Fu.
Show me.
However, he had undergone neck surgery before filming and had to train while wearing a neck brace. Due to the surgery, Reeves performed very few kicks in the movie. The start of filming action sequences was delayed to allow him more time to recover. Production began with less physically demanding scenes, such as Neo evading agents in the office building. Incredibly, Reeves performed the iconic scene where Neo stands on the edge of a skyscraper without a double or safety wires. Carrie-Anne Moss wasn't spared from injuries either. Early in production, she sprained her ankle, but chose not to disclose it for fear of losing her role. During the rooftop fight scene, the actor playing Agent Jones suffered a serious head injury when he was yanked too hard by wires. Before each major fight sequence, the principal cast rehearsed extensively under the guidance of Wu Ping's team. The subway fight between Neo and Agent Smith was the most difficult scene to shoot. It required dozens of takes and went 10 days over schedule. The actors performed all their own stunts, except those involving being slammed into walls, which were handled by doubles. The lobby shootout scene was equally demanding and took approximately 20 takes to capture. To ease the actors' burden, they used lightweight prop weapons weighing only 200 grams. Moss managed to run along the wall successfully on her 8th attempt. A major challenge was rebuilding the destroyed sets after failed takes, a time-consuming and costly process. For the elevator shaft explosion, real fire was used. The scene was filmed with an inverted camera mounted at the ceiling, shooting at 120 frames per second. Later, CGI was used to combine the flames with footage of the falling elevator doors. The sequence where Neo fires a minigun from a helicopter was filmed on a soundstage with artificial lighting. The glass skyscraper in the background was actually a giant backdrop stretched over a metal frame. Reeves fired a real minigun loaded with blanks. For the helicopter crash into the skyscraper, the team used models. The iconic wave effect was critical to the Wachowskis, and they initially tried to achieve it practically. When materials didn't behave as expected, they combined practical and visual effects. A lightweight 3-meter helicopter model was mounted on a metal arm and crashed into a set resembling a skyscraper, followed by detonated pyrotechnics to create the desired effect. Separate explosions were filmed and layered in post-production to complete the sequence. One of the Matrix's defining innovations was the bullet time effect, which made time appear to slow down. Though not a new technique, the Wachowskis popularized it, inspiring countless other filmmakers. Visual effects supervisor John Gaida refined the method, combining high-speed photography with other techniques to create a flawless time slice. Over 100 cameras were positioned along a calculated trajectory to simultaneously or sequentially capture the action. The footage was then compiled frame by frame. The resulting scenes played at an astonishing 12,000 frames per second, compared to the standard 24 frames per second.
Whoa.
The film's $12 million VFX budget also covered the development of the Sentinels and machines. For the scene where Neo's abdomen is implanted with a tracker, animatronics and a prosthetic torso were used. Makeup was employed to make Neo's mouth disappear, while digital effects created the plugs on his body. For Neo's awakening in the pod, Keanu Reeves lost around 15 pounds and shaved his entire body to give his character a more emaciated appearance. A scene where Neo and Morpheus dangle from a helicopter almost led to legal issues. Private helicopter flights were illegal in Australia, and the production inadvertently violated the law. Thankfully, the producers managed to resolve the issue. The scene where Morpheus introduces Neo to the Matrix featured pairs of twins to create the illusion of a program's glitch. The eerie moment where passersby freeze in place was achieved without CGI. Interestingly, the last shot filmed was the sewer sequence, where Neo flushes himself into the pipeline, even though it appears early in the movie. Costume designer Kim Barrett created the now iconic looks of the characters. She had to develop Trinity's outfit from scratch, as the script only described her as a woman in black. Barrett also redesigned Neo's wardrobe, switching from a silver coat to the black trench coat seen in the film. The Wachowskis even referenced her in the movie. During Neo's elevator ride to the Oracle, the name Kim is visible on the wall. The characters wore sunglasses from the Blinde brand, each chosen deliberately. Agents had rectangular frames, while Zion residents wore rounded ones. The Matrix's iconic green code, made up of cascading symbols, was created by designer Simon Whiteley. The symbols were inspired by sushi recipes from a Japanese cookbook owned by his wife. The film is filled with references to art and pop culture that influence the Wachowskis. The concept of living in a simulated world was drawn from Grant Morrison's comic, The Invisibles. The overall tone, title, and the character of Trinity were inspired by William Gibson's cyberpunk novel Neuromancer. The White Rabbit and Mirror passage were nods to Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. Neo's apartment number 101 references George Orwell's 1984, while Trinity's room number 303 reflects her name. Jean Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation appears early in the film as Neo's hidden storage book. It was required reading for the cast and crew to help them understand the Matrix's world.
The body cannot live without the mind.
Films like Dark City, World on a Wire, and Hotel New Rose influenced the movie's style, as did the cyberpunk anime Ghost in the Shell, with several shots directly mirroring it. Keanu Reeves even adopted Bruce Lee's signature nose rub before each fight scene. Movie mistakes and errors. Now let's count some of the slip-ups and errors the creators of The Matrix made. At the beginning of the film, Trinity is in total darkness, illuminated only by the flashlights of police officers entering the room. However, moments later, several lit lamps can be seen on the walls. When Trinity crashes through the window while escaping the agents, the hanging light fixture remains still as she takes aim at the window. Then it suddenly starts swinging, only to stop moving abruptly. The computer monitor alternates between projecting an image onto Neo's face and not doing so, even though the monitor's glow wouldn't realistically reflect like that. Additionally, Neo is sitting upright, with his head positioned to the right of the monitor. Seconds later, it looks like he's lying down, with his head shifted to the center. In the director's office, Neo's hands alternate between being behind his back and in front of him. He also opens the envelope twice, and when the phone rings, the screen of the phone is inexplicably dark. The company name on the office wall differs from the one on the building's exterior. When Neo drops his phone out of the window, a parade can be seen on the street below. However, in the next shot, the street is completely empty and shown in different lighting. The papers in Agent Smith's hands shift positions between shots, and his glasses disappear from the table entirely. Neo jumps back into a corner in fear, but his reflection shows him still sitting at the table. When Trinity approaches the bridge, she opens the car door twice. The car's upholstery also changes between shots. Morpheus's arm alternates between being behind his back and hanging at his side. It's unclear how Morpheus ends up in the simulation before Neo. as he was standing next to him when Neo was being loaded in. Additionally, Morpheus's glasses switch between matte and glossy lenses in different shots. Neo is standing in a completely empty space, but suddenly a shadow appears beneath his feet. Before Neo is loaded into the simulation, his legs are clamped to the chair. However, when he returns, he immediately jumps up without anyone unfastening him. In a wide shot, Neo and Morpheus are several meters from the ventilation shaft, but in a close-up, they are right next to it. When Neo jumps from the roof, you can see safety harnesses under his clothes. Entering and exiting the Matrix always requires help from an operator, yet Cypher manages to do it on his own. The piece of meat on Cypher's fork changes appearance between shots. Neo's sideburns mysteriously change in length and shape on the way to the Oracle. In a close-up shot, the camera lens is clearly visible in the reflection on a doorknob, which is installed backward, as indicated by screws on the outside. Before entering the Oracle's apartment, Morpheus is wearing glasses, but when he's inside, they disappear. The glasses on the shelf also change positions between shots. The square cookie in Neo's hand turns into a round one within seconds. Neo sees the same cat performing the same action twice, and calls it déjà vu. However, déjà vu refers to the sensation of experiencing something familiar from the distant past, making this scene a misrepresentation. When Smith's hands are stuck in the wall, they're shown to be buried up to the elbows from the inside, but only to the wrists from the outside. Smith should have started struggling immediately, but instead, he calmly lies under Morpheus, waiting for the fight to begin. Apoc suddenly has glasses on his face, even though he wasn't wearing them during the shootout. The toilet bends and wobbles like rubber when Morpheus falls on it. Before Smith is punched in the face, his glasses are split into two pieces. After the punch, they disappear entirely. Smith punches a massive hole in a brick wall, which vanishes seconds later. When Tank shoots Cypher, a body double can be seen in place of Joe Pantoliano. It's strange that Dozer dies from a single blast, while Tank survives too. Agent Smith speaks in the present tense about animals adapting to Earth's environment, even though all living creatures were wiped out long ago.
Every mammal on this planet instinctively develops a natural equilibrium with the surrounding environment, but you humans do not.
Neo has no visible weapons under his coat, yet in the next shot, they materialize out of thin air. Previously, several bodies were visible near the elevator, but they vanish during the explosion, as do the damaged columns. The fire ignites on the ground floor, yet the sprinkler system activates throughout the entire building. When Agent Jones dodges bullets, he's several meters from the steps on the rooftop. When he shoots at Neo, he is suddenly positioned directly in front of them. Bullets heading toward the building inexplicably fail to damage its windows. Also, Trinity is standing to Neo's right, but when he asks for help, he turns his head to the left. Neo throws his guns to the ground, but in the next shot, they are gone. Trinity and the soldiers' bodies also disappear. In this same scene, the weather changes rapidly, and the lighting on the characters shifts directions. Trinity aims at an agent's temple while he's standing sideways, but in the next shot, he's facing her head-on, and she shoots him in the forehead. Neo fires into the room where the agents and Morpheus are, but on closer inspection, the room appears empty. It's also unlikely that Neo could avoid hitting Morpheus, as the agents were standing near him, and Neo was firing chaotically. Agent Smith shoots Morpheus from the side with an outstretched arm, yet Morpheus is hit in the back as though the shot came from a prone position. Trinity suddenly has gloves on her hands while in the helicopter, even though she wasn't wearing them before. When Neo is holding Morpheus, you can see a wire peeking out from under Morpheus's sleeve. When the helicopter flies over Neo, there's no shadow from the blades, but it appears in the next shot. However, the helicopter itself fails to show up in the building's reflections. A column visibly has a weak point that allows it to shatter with a single punch. Realistically, Smith's hand should have sustained significant damage, not the column. The blood on Neo's lips and chin changes position between shots, and the debris scattered across the subway tracks is neatly arranged off to the side. Neo openly grabs onto safety wires, and his hair repeatedly switches between dusty and clean. Neo is initially pursued by Agent Smith, but later it's Agent Brown. Neo stops bullets, which fall at his feet, but in the wide shot, they are nowhere to be seen. It's odd that the agents, who have physical superiority in the Matrix, rely on regular pistols and never think to wear body armor. Additionally, all the firearms in the film fire without any recoil. From a scientific perspective, it makes no sense for the machines to use humans as energy sources, as the energy extracted from humans would be less than the energy needed to keep them alive. Did you notice any other mistakes that we didn't include in our list? Let us know in the comments. Deleted scenes and bloopers. Unfortunately, there are no publicly available additional scenes that would offer a new perspective on the Matrix. However, various cuts of the finished film have been made for different reasons over time. For example, in the British theatrical version, about 10 seconds of the most violent headbutts in the fights between Morpheus and Smith in the bathroom and between Neo and Smith in the subway were removed to secure a milder rating. The Fox television broadcast omitted the spoon scene before Neo's meeting with the Oracle and reduced the number of bullets fired at Neo near the film's end. Additionally, in the French dub, some dialogues were slightly altered from the original version. Interestingly, home and television versions released after 2004 differ from the 1999 releases by applying a blue tint to all scenes in the real world and a green tint to those set within the Matrix. Now, enjoy a brief selection of bloopers and funny moments from the set. Worldwide recognition. The Matrix was released in wide theaters on March 31st, 1999, earning $27.8 million in its opening weekend. It topped the box office for 2 consecutive weeks, ultimately grossing $171 million in the United States and $292 million internationally. The total box office revenue reached $463 million, against a production budget of $63 million and $30 million spent on marketing. Official information about actor salaries remains unavailable, but it is known that Keanu Reeves received a base salary of $10 million and 10% of the box office earnings. The film achieved not only widespread audience acclaim, but also critical praise. Reviewers highlighted its masterful blend of philosophical depth, thrilling action, and groundbreaking special effects. Naturally, The Matrix was a strong contender during awards season. BAFTA awarded it for Best Special Visual Effects and Best Sound. MTV Movie Awards honored it in categories like Best Movie, Best Male Performance, and Best Fight. The Saturn Awards named it the Best Science Fiction Film and recognized the Wachowskis for their direction. At the Oscars, The Matrix won all 4 categories in which it was nominated: Best Film Editing, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound, and Best Sound Editing. The commercial success of The Matrix prompted producers to greenlight sequels. Notably, Marcus Chong, who played the operator Tank, was initially expected to return for the follow-ups. However, after demanding a significantly higher salary, the filmmakers decided to exclude his character from the story. Chong responded with threats and even filed a lawsuit against the producers and directors, which he ultimately lost. Unfortunately for him, this conflict irreparably damaged his career, as no one wanted to work with the controversial actor afterward. In May 2003, The Matrix Reloaded debuted, followed by The Matrix Revolutions in October of the same year. Additionally, the Wachowskis contributed scripts to several episodes of The Animatrix, a collection of animated shorts set within the Matrix universe. The franchise also inspired video games and comic books. After completing the trilogy, the directors announced they had no plans for further sequels. However, in 2019, Lana Wachowski, formerly Larry before transitioning, returned to co-write a new installment and ultimately directed it. The fourth film in the franchise, The Matrix Resurrections, premiered in late 2021. Unfortunately, it failed to resonate with audiences and bombed at the box office. Despite this, Warner Bros. Began developing a fifth installment in early 2024, with Drew Goddard slated as director and screenwriter, and Lana Wachowski joining as an executive producer. The Matrix became a landmark film for the careers of its directors and cast, while leaving an indelible mark on cinema and pop culture. The movie's release led to a surge in sales of black trench coats and sunglasses, with some fashion designers even creating collections inspired by the film. Which Matrix movie is your favorite?